All right. We're here. We're here with Aric Bandy. I am so excited because Aric Bandy has done 2 exits just really of late. I'll let him tell his story. He'll tell it much better than I tell it. And this is so exciting because the Founder's Path is all about stories of basically cradle to graving organizations, or if you're a Jim Collins fan, you're a good to greater, and you're cradle to ongoing lasting. But we like to hear about how basically organizations go from a spark to their goals. And the goal could be an exit. The goal could be a good to great, like we talked about. And I am going to zip my mouth. Everybody knows that I love to chat. And our star guest, Mr. Aric Bandy, I'm going to have him talk a little bit of some of his sparks to exits and tell a little bit about his namesake and everything else, because I think it's kind of fun to hear about our guests. So, Aric, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Valerie. It's great to be here.
Right. And I'm always curious, kind of like the Cheshire Cat, asking Alice where she wants to go, and her going, boom, I don't know where I want to go. And he's going, I don't really care. That is not the case when we're working with Aric. There is a beginning and an exit the last 2 times. So tell us about some of your successes and steps, because I know you're off to like Italy tomorrow to transition another organization, and then maybe some bloopers, things you wouldn't do again on some of this stuff.
Well, if anybody started a company, they probably are willing to admit there's more bloopers, more lessons learned is the positive way to put it, than there are successes. I mean, what's the famous quote? The path to success is paved with failures. It is so true. So I'll definitely try to think of some more comical bloopers that are more entertaining than just the sad heart, the heart like that. Oh, I can't believe I screwed that up kind of failure. But thankfully, there's some successes in there too. So yes, recently exited a company. So AVT, Applied Value Technologies, was a 3-year startup. It had grown from really 0 to $1 million, $1 million to $8 million, $8 million to $19 million. I came in as the CEO. I was brought in by the private equity firm to actually take the company, really take, like, the way I've described it with like internal employees, there was like chapters of a book. Like chapter 1 was really just getting the company up and operational. This was just like, and anybody that's been and founded a company knows, when you're that first chapter, it is about survival, but it's really more than just survival. It's about like getting things kind of functioning and sort of working. And good founders will know, and they'll admit, a lot of times you're putting in things you're going to rip out in chapter 2 or chapter 3 because it's just good enough to get going. Maybe it's a sales process or an accounting process, or you launch on QuickBooks and you outgrow it pretty quick, or there's any number of examples. So I was brought in what I call chapter 2. Chapter 1 was we got it stood up. Chapter 2 was, okay, now we're ready to start to mature our operations and build a go-to-market to go from, at the time was about 19 million in revenue, not quite, and scale it out to, the plan was 100 million in 5 years. So I came in and pretty quick realized I needed to make some tweaks and changes. The board felt like the company was like ready to scale. But as usual, someone else comes in with a fresh set of eyes and says, the house isn't quite perfect. We've got to there's some problems with the foundation. We need to fix this before we scale it. So got to work on some of that, implemented for those founders that have ever heard of EOS or Entrepreneurial Operating System, implemented EOS, had to make some adjustments on the leadership team, brought in some really capable leaders, made some tweaks in our operations. Our finances and our financial operations were already healthy, but I had to make some changes on the accountability side and really create a culture of high performance and accountability, which was a little bit lacking, surprisingly, in a startup. A lot of startups, those first number of people, they're all bought into it. And I think we had a great culture, but the culture wasn't quite as aligned with actually achieving outcomes as much as it needed to be. So I had to work through a change management program to really get the team, to understand in order to scale. We've actually have to mature certain things. As all of that was happening, our biggest customer was a Fortune 50 technology company. And they were very demanding. If anybody has worked with Fortune 500, Fortune 100, especially big tech companies, having worked across multiple industries over the years, technology and actually automotive manufacturing are some of the hardest, at least in my experience. And so it was a very challenging customer, but we were growing and beating out HCL. And HCL is in almost any, so I'm not saying anything like that because I'm not disclosing anything super competitive because HCL is everywhere. And here we are, a little startup. Like I said, we were doing 19 million or so when I came in, and we were competing with these global players and winning more business. During, about a year in, started getting interest from companies to acquire us, which is way earlier than planned. But we had really put something in place, and the growth opportunity and the potential for what we were doing was beginning to outpace our ability to actually grow. There's something that most of your founders will actually understand. If you've been through it before, is growth is not linear. I wish to God it was. Life would be so easier. But it simply is not. And it's really clunky growth, especially in managed services or IT services, which this was. I should back up for a moment. I've had 2/3 of my career has been in the IT services space and about 1/3 in IT B2B SaaS product space. So I have experience in both. But in the IT services and IT managed services, it is not a linear process and growth. And so we were hitting a threshold. I had 160 employees, operations in North America, Singapore, and Amsterdam. And we were, it's hard. It's crazy to even say that we were a victim of our own success. Everything was going well that the demand was greater than our ability to hire up to we had to build an offshore team, and I needed to double or triple in the span of 9 months, 12 months, maybe if I was lucky. And that rapid growth, we could have done it. It would have been messy. There would have been lots of bloopers, like you talked about at the beginning. However, the opportunity to partner and be acquired, especially since that interest was coming in, warranted exploration. It's public. So sold to Wipro, $11 billion IT services company based out of India that has operations globally. We had acquisition interest from 3 other global, very large companies. And what really we were doing is these organizations were looking for a different way, a different kind of engagement style, a different thought process, and an employee group that was doing things differently. And what we were doing, especially in this Fortune 50, was different enough that they wanted to have that a part of it. So they came in and they, put together a very attractive acquisition package, and it made sense for us as shareholders to be able to actually exit. And so sold in December after a 3-year run, wrapped up with revenues at about it was on a run rate about 28 million. Closed the year at 24 million, so grew from 19 to 24 in my tenure, but run rate was actually higher than that. And it was a good transaction. It was a good transaction for the employees and, like I said, the shareholders as well. So I am now, having just spent the last 3 months actually helping with the transaction and just overseeing and making sure that the integration into Wipro goes smooth. I'm now officially unemployed.
You worked yourself out of a job. Isn't that nice? That is the place of SaaS, and that is the place of a lot of the goals of a lot of startups is obviously a sell-off. And I have found of late in listening to your story, there's some key elements of accountability that I heard, especially if they were doing EOS, they were doing obviously the accountability charts and things like that, but all the way through to what is our goal, and then taking advantage of opportunity when it arose, because sometimes you can't deliver as fast as market is demanding it. And that will inhibit growth if you have things falling off the plate and not delivering. And then there's the whole sense of not fearing working yourself out of a job. It's kind of like more what is next. And I found of late, especially in technology, that really there's not many good degraders going on. It's really more the goal of eventually selling and combining, even in the very small managed services space I was at right a boom, and that's really all the MSPs were trying to figure out how to consolidate, because it gets what I call in the digital deluge, it gets very, very difficult to sift and differentiate yourself. So, and you're gainfully unemployed, but it sounds like you were a shareholder, which is not a bad deal either. So I always have to ask if you're rinsing and repeating, because it sounds like you've done this a couple times, Aric, so far. You're rinsing and repeating. What seems to be next on the radar with you?
Yeah, no, taking a little bit of time to kind of reflect. I'm doing some fractional work at the moment, and I'm looking for the right kind of opportunity. I've had, you reach a certain point where, like, I've worked for 2 private equity firms now. This last one was a fantastic experience. And, having had the blessing of being able to do this twice, the first company I sold, I've actually sold and purchased a number of companies over the years, but a lot of them were, the way I describe them, are like entrepreneurial led, where they're small deals, they're millions of dollars, maybe $10 million, but they're not like big deals. It's the 2 entrepreneurs sitting opposite each other with their attorneys like right here, and we're hammering it out, and then the attorneys go and memorialize it, and it's done. But I've done 2 big boy deals. The first one I closed in March of 2020, and I had built one of Google's largest partners in North America with Augusto, and sold to a New York private equity firm. And we merged then with another company because they were doing a platform play, and so it was a roll up, and we were the second acquisition in the thesis, in the strategy. And it took me. I was there for 13 years, really building that and growing it, and multiple stages of rounding, funding. I got Google to invest twice because we were a Google partner. I did another strategic, did a mezzanine round. The last one was 6.5 million, just to be able to continue to fuel growth. And again, if you're founders that are listening to this podcast, I know they're all living and breathing like, okay, what's our cash look like in order to grow, especially MSPs? You have to have capital in order to grow, because you've got to be able to staff. Like I was saying, it's not a linear growth, and you have to have your inventory as people. So you have to be able to have the capacity before you can get out and sell it. But you're always trying to sell a little bit ahead, and getting funding for especially IT services and managed service companies are very challenging. There's a small handful of strategic growth capital firms that really get the value of services, and how services can be actually, they can yield good multiples. They can actually have good transactions, but so much of the market is either, SaaS product, they want, or private equity. They want big, most private equity firms, at least that I've been working with, they don't like to write checks that are, 10 million, 20 million. They need to write checks that are 50 million, 100 million, and they need to write bigger checks because it just costs them a lot of money. On that first transaction in 2020, I think their fees for accounting and legal was like $1.4 million just for accounting and legal. So they have to write a check big enough that it just makes sense to even incur that kind of cost. So it makes it super challenging as you're a founder trying to figure out, how do I grow this thing? How do I fund this thing? What vehicles do I have? So it took me 13 years to get that first one done. Long time. But I learned a lot along the way. And the second time, thankfully, it's a lot shorter.
Well, but the market changes too. That you're also dealing with the market doing this kind of stuff, and the buying behaviors are changing as well while you're doing that 13-year journey. In that. And I think that you just said something that's very important that people don't understand, especially you said I'm doing some fractional work or whatever. Free is never free. Let's put that down there, right? Let's lay that out. I am fractional and I get all the time. Well, but couldn't you just do it for equity? Think about what you're asking somebody when you say something like that. First of all, everybody has bills to pay, right? Yep. Everybody's got bills to pay. And unless you have tons of discretionary income that isn't tied up elsewhere, like a lot of my funds are tied up in other things, right? And so you think about that cash flow. I was on LinkedIn the other day in fact, I made a post about it because I was kind of laughing over it. There was some startup guru that, and he's like, never ask for, when you're first learning to do this stuff, don't ask for more than 5 million. Well, I just heard you say PE does not want to sign checks for under 50 to 100 million. So how do you traverse pre-seed, seed, all of these different rounds? And then you've got the other side that said, well, you're an entrepreneur, never get cash, never go to equity, never get anything, but you've got to have cash flow because that's the number one reason businesses fail is cash flow. Yeah. So what do you have? Honestly, I am curious about that because I almost laughed my head off when it said, don't take any more than 5 million. And I'm like, but that depends on your market, doesn't it?
So, yeah. Universal. And I'm assuming the person didn't mean to intend universal because like I'm talking about a services company and private equity. They like to buy companies. They like to buy multiples on EBITDA. They'll definitely have a thesis and sometimes product can for sure play a part of that. And so then that's a multiple of like, if it's B2B SaaS, then it's a multiple of ARR. Depends on the industry as what it is. When I'm talking about like PEs, I wasn't trying to make a general statement. It is really like IT services and IT managed services. Sure. Tends to be the general. Like certainly if you're in the VC space, you can get checks that are written a lot smaller than that. We at SkyKit, we've done our Series A. And those were smaller checks, thankfully, because if they were too big, they dilute you. So to that advice you got, some of this is for founders to be really thoughtful about how much dilution. I was literally just ideating with a friend earlier today on a potential business idea we're kicking around, and it would require a capital raise. It would be a platform play. And we were talking through like the kind of rough, every time you raise capital, this is a generalization, but it's about 20 to maybe 25% dilution every single time you go. So you want to find the right balance. How much cash do you need, but not too much cash, but not too little cash that you run out of fumes, you run out of gas too early. You're always capital raising. Like there's a really delicate balance in there. I had somebody ask me the other day, like if I was to just manage a business, what are the three? What are the things I would use? They didn't say three. I said three. I said there was 3 things. If I only had 3 things to manage a business, and I should say the financials because it's not the only 3. It's 4 things if I say the entire business. One is I need to, obviously P&L every month. I need to see like how finances are doing. The budget to actual. So that you're projecting across the year and every month you're seeing the actuals drop in. So are you ahead of the game or behind the game? And when you're trying to bootstrap, that is like such a crucial analysis to see how you're managing because you can't serve 2 masters as you can't serve for top line growth, but then also maximizing bottom line profitability. It's really one or the other. You have to have a certain amount of profitability at the bottom. You can't go zero or negative, especially even in today's world. It used to be that, product, they didn't care. I remember 2018, we were raising capital for SkyKit, and I sat down with a very very sizable Chicago-based VC and said, when should a company, a B2B SaaS company, be profitable? And his response was like, maybe when you get north of 50 million in ARR, but I wouldn't bother before that. Today's world is totally different. Silicon Valley Bank, First Republic, all of that madness has entirely changed the game of how VCs are looking at B2B SaaS. And cash, you don't have to make a ton of money. You have to have growth, but you can't be losing money from a cash standpoint every month. So you have to have and that budget versus actual helps you manage that growth. So if you're serving the growth objective, how to manage that bottom. But then your week in, week out cash forecast, like that is like so crucial. And it's surprising how many businesses don't actually have that. And I'm like, how do you know what's going to happen in December? Like, honestly, like right now, you should know what's going to happen in December and what December is going to look like with a degree of accuracy. And then the last would be the pipeline, the sales pipeline, and data around your conversion rates. And if you just have those assets, those 4 assets, you'll be able to tell the health of an organization today and for the reasonably foreseeable future. So, and it's surprising how many, especially founders, a lot of times they're really gifted and skilled at what they do. Like if they're a technologist, if they're in development and they have a product idea, or they're they have deep business expertise and they turn to somebody else to build a product. But as a founder, you have to be good at a lot of stuff in order to survive. Or you got to be able to learn quick and surround yourself with good advisors and mentors.
Good advisors and mentors. But again, going back to all of that, and I love the 4 points because that I agree 100%. I found in my experience that it needs to happen, but that is one of the biggest failings is they don't. First of all, when you're first starting, you've got to be able to forecast and not be afraid of forecasting. You're going to probably fail quickly, right? But at the end of the day, you can't really go. At the beginning, I talked about Alice in Wonderland, right? If you don't know where you want to go, you won't get there. And they are very good at delivery. They're good at what their product is, but the actual nuts and bolts of how the organism of a company actually grows. I don't care if you're a nonprofit or whatever you are, the way that it has to grow, you aren't going to be able to deliver if you don't mind each of those 4 points. Yeah. You aren't. And I call it the 3-legged stool. You have to have finance, you have to have operations, and you have to have revenue generation. If you don't have those 3, then it doesn't matter how good you deliver. If there is no revenue generation to backfill for delivery, you're done. You can't keep rinsing and repeating. And if you can't do it forecast with a degree of accuracy at some point, then there can't be any planning to then rinse and repeat and grow. And so I think that those 4 points are extremely key. I think some of us get very nervous of saying, when I say us, period, in the beginning parts of it, nervous period about how much financing and when and why. And it answers, if you could forecast where you want to go, I know in the clients that I work with, it's so odd that the financial statements actually calm them down because they go, wait, that's doable.
Yeah.
Oh, wait, now I got a plan. And then it's like this big relief that they have some kind of plan of attack against, that kind of thing. So I think that you're spot on with that. So Aric,
you'd at the beginning of the call, you'd asked for bloopers, but this isn't exactly a blooper, but it's a funny anecdote. Okay. So every business, I'm a sales guy at heart. That's who I am by nature. But whether it's my need to control my, environment or anxiety or whatever, I end up have gotten into pretty detailed financial planning as a way to constantly make sure I've got a plan and understand where the business is going to go and how we're going to get there. So I came into AVT in middle of 2023. Business was going. There was lots of good things, cash flow, strong EBITDA, lots of right stuff. Some stuff, as I mentioned, had to be fixed. But in order to build a growth plan, I really needed to get my arms wrapped around it. So I built, and I've done this a few times, really a bottoms up growth plan. So when do you hire salespeople? What's the salespeople ramp time? What's the quote of the salespeople? Then how are we going to go with digital marketing? What's the conversion rate? What's that pay per click? And then how does that fill the top of the funnel? It was very detailed, very complex, rolling, then it tagged in with, because we're a managed services company, it converted into revenue, when that would actually see that revenue, and then how that would convert to cash, and the P&Ls and everything. Built the whole thing up, felt really good about it. Went into a board meeting in December of that year to pitch that this is how I'm going to grow. I'm going to hire these salespeople at this time frame, Got done with the whole thing. And one of the board members, who is a very senior business consultant, was like, and this is great. It was kind of my inaugural thing. He's like, this is really sound. It's really great. It's a little nerdy, Aric. He's like, you kind of overbuilt the model. I'm like, that might be, but it helped me actually get my arms wrapped around the business. So, I encourage, I just cued off of what you said about doing the financial modeling. And, I've talked to, and I'm a mentor now. It's something I really love doing. Entrepreneurs and founders that are thinking of starting stuff. And it's one of the things, and I recommend just be willing with ChatGPT or Claude or Gemini. There's so many tools. If you've never done financial planning, there's no reason to not get into that today. Start with a spreadsheet, use ChatGPT, and just start plugging away with your assumptions and do a bottoms up, all of the assumptions in there. So then you can tweak. Well, what happens if digital marketing costs this per ad? And what's that conversion rate? And then how does that translate when I throw $1,000 or $10,000 or $100,000 at it? And you can see the numbers just go and what that means. It really makes you get to know your business and where your assumptions truly are. And not enough founders do that.
No, they don't. And I think that there's a healthy fear when I have a mentoring line as well. And when I am doing that, there's two things that I would like to bring up with what you just said. Number one, anybody who is a professional has a mentor. I don't care who you are. That if you're sports, before we started recording, we talked about musicians. There is not a musician out there that doesn't have a coach. I mean, that's just how it is. You cannot hear yourself. So even if you're nervous of that financial modeling, I don't know what I am. You said you're a sales guy at heart. I'm all of it, right? But at the end of the day, numbers some of them have anxiety over it, but there is a way to digest it so you understand end-to-end business. Yeah. And if that's the case, then call it. If you're not sure how to do that and you want absolute that relief, call Aric, call a mentor, call somebody and say, hey, you've done this before, and hey, you've nerded out. That's his opinion. I've also nerded out on the exact same thing because I can't see the pitfalls without seeing the pitfalls, right? And even if that doesn't happen that way, at least you had that stinking plan where you could go and say, here's my actuals against that. Because you mentioned it earlier. Sometimes in a long sales cycle, if you have not, 6 to 9 months in, if it takes that long for a salesman to ramp, there may be some fixes that need to be with the product, but there may be some fixes that you need to anticipate your ramp time with a salesperson, because that's the one thing that it's hard to rush, right? Yep. If you're in an enterprise deal, rushing that enterprise deal, let's say it's to school districts or whatever, right? How quick is the school district going to make a decision? I don't know. How
A long
quick can you
time,
get
which
them
is
to the line?
why enterprise is bad enough, let alone fled or fed, the school districts. Those are some tough sales cycles.
And I'm just saying though, but you can actually financially model those in, and it may not be the go to market. It may be, if it happens, great. I'm going to work on this channel. Then we're going to groom somebody, and you can't do that strategy if you don't lay down what you're saying in your 4 points, right?
Yeah.
And as nerdy as it is, it's also so necessary. And so we could say that, but it is so necessary for sure.
I think some people, and I don't know, maybe this is right, maybe it isn't. I think some people don't take the initiative because there is something that some people are afraid of being wrong. And I think when you get comfortable being wrong and just giving yourself permission, I'm going to be wrong. No matter what, this model is going to be wrong. Then there's a freedom with it. I was just meeting with the CEO of a $35 million company. They're going through a change management process, going through like some reorg, some new leadership, dealing with some accountability stuff. There's just some complacency that they're working through. And I was just chatting with the CEO, and he was talking about the change management. And I said, one of the things that I found really important when I did this with AVT was to just get your senior leadership team to get comfortable. Like, you're going to make a mistake, and that's okay. Like, if we don't make some mistakes, I mean, it's that old cliche. If you don't make mistakes, you're not moving fast enough. But there's really truth to it. That's why it's a cliche. And you need to have freedom to be like, I'm going to make a mistake. In fact, not even just I'm going to make a mistake. I'm going to measure my mistakes, not quantity. You're not holding scorecards against you screwed up, so don't do it again. But like, if you're measuring, like on sales, we were talking about measuring the yield. And so you're projecting X sales. Well, what did you actually do? And then use that data to help you forecast better the next time around. You're effectively kind of measuring your mistakes. But it's a freedom that A, you're going to make mistakes. B, it's okay. And you can learn a lot from it if you don't have other things get in the way, like ego or fear. And then if you measure those mistakes, it really helps you figure out how to continue to enhance and refine as you roll along. And hopefully get to a point where you're making less mistakes. Reality, you're probably just making different ones. But anyways.
Well, and I think that we could accurately not even call them mistakes, right? Because it's just behavioral points that you can count how many times you closed this way and it closed as one, and how many times you closed and did these steps. I have a perfect prospect meeting scorecard that I've set up, and we can literally score and say, okay, how many times when you got this score did you close a deal in X date for velocity, right? I mean, cool. That is one of the things that if you follow these steps, then we can refine those steps, and maybe we don't need 2 of them. Maybe we don't need 3 of them. But as soon as we remove that step, we see that the close rate goes down. It's like, okay, so how many times when you got on the call, did you start feature benefit vomiting on everybody versus talking about themselves, right? I mean, and serving that part of it up. And I think that that's more of what you're actually talking about. It's not, it is being able to check your ego at the door, like you said. But then once you check your ego at the door, being able to say, hey, the whole goal is to win deals.
Yeah.
So what do I need to refine? Just like a football player or a soccer player, or if you want to call it European football, whatever you want to say. How many times do I have to do that same movement over and over again to then practice it till I don't get it wrong, to then be the top performer, right? Yeah. And they'll write down even the angle. I'm a tennis player, so okay. The angle and how many times have you hit that exactly that same way. And I get sometimes lambasted because someone will say, you can't measure that. And I said, watch me. I bet you I can. I
Yep.
bet you I can. I bet you I can tell exactly when I was training vocalists. I sang opera for 18 years and I was training them. I said, I bet you I can notice you doing a same kind of thing over and over again, that if we change that behavior, you will be able to win. So I 100% agree.
Yeah.
If you can't measure, and I remember one time I was in heavy equipment manufacturing, and so I've been in SaaS and I've been in physical product, and in heavy equipment manufacturing there was this it was construction, it was civil, so it was some rough and tumble guys, right? They're
Yeah.
on these drill rigs,
Yeah.
and they're like, we can't measure that, and I'm like, I bet you we can.
Yeah. No, I think you're right. I think, it is about, I said it like mistakes, but you're right. It's not so much as like really learnings.
Learning.
And
I love
it's keeping those, that ego, because that's the one challenge that can happen, is, again, it's being a founder and, especially if you're doing a startup, but it doesn't matter even if you come in, like the last company I didn't start, but I came in with a founder mindset. So I think being a founder doesn't necessarily mean you actually start something. It's coming in with that mindset, regardless of what the size of the organization is. To me, okay, I have this thing. My last leadership team teased me about it because I use it a lot, but it's a great analogy. You have zoo animals and wild animals, and so you've heard this before.
Nope, I'm listening. I'm just engaged.
So the zoo animals are, there's four walls, there's shelter, there's healthcare, there's 3 square meals a day, but there's a very set confinement. And so surviving in a zoo requires the right kind of animal that is comfortable with being in a zoo, and they don't have the same autonomy, the same ability to just go out and do whatever they want to do. Wild animal, very different. No boundaries, no shelter, no 3 square meals a day, no healthcare, but also no definition. So, complete autonomy, complete ability to see and figure out our boundary is going to be here. I'm going to go hunt and kill like this, and I'm going to evolve like that. And so it's really analogous to, entrepreneurs, founders, and that kind of mindset, comparatively to then, people in more of a traditional corporate setting. And I don't want to try to say one is better than the other, because frankly, you can't have a whole company full of wild animals. That's chaos. That would be a disaster. You have to have structure, and you have to have people comfortable to execute in that structure in order to build an organization that scales to any kind of size. But you have to have both. So this kind of founder mindset is kind of like a wild animal mindset, and you don't have to found something, start something in order to actually bring in this kind of entrepreneurial wild animal mindset and really breathe new life into an organization. So if you can do that while at the same time leaving your ego at the door, it allows not only yourself, but those around you, the leadership team, your direct reports, to be more comfortable to take risks. I did a podcast a little bit ago on attachment theory, and applying attachment theory, which is a psychological concept in how people establish relationships, how attachment theory can actually be applied in a professional environment, obviously carefully, but done so, and to create a highly high performance team, because you create an environment of trust where there's comfort to explore, there's comfort to experiment. As soon as you start experimenting, you're going to increase the amount of failures. But it is through that experimentation that you actually find those nuggets, those like beautiful things, a new product idea, a tweak or a feature that you did not think was going to sell. And all of a sudden that thing is the thing that drives the product forward. Or you just allow somebody to engage with a different type of sales process. That one I'd be careful with. But, you have some innovation that can happen, and in careful circumstances, and, you can break things out.
Yeah, absolutely. There's some really great nuggets in this. I feel like I'm going to have to watch this one over and over again to see your advice, and to I'm going to watch your other podcast on attachment theory. That was something that was new to me today. I mean, just not putting a name to it and talking about it in that sort of environment. And then I love your analogy of the animal analogy. And I think you're correct. You don't have to be a founder. You don't have to have founded the business to have some of that mentality, but you can't be a bunch of wild animals in there. So it's like our jobs, especially in the fractional arena, is to kind of bring some structure to the early stages of things. So it has a little bit of structure. At the same time, it's the right structure at the right point of the cycle of the business. And I've dealt with a lot of coaches, and there's two sides of it. So I will say, Aric, you're on this side that I really appreciate, which is a little more on the experience. Wash my mouth. I can't do anything with it. On the experiential side of the fence, where the answer becomes, it depends.
Yeah.
And I think when I mentioned the one startup guy and he talked about the 5 million, I think what he was missing is the word "it depends." And that's where the problem in my mind started to, there was something that someone brought up with different AI agents and different things. And the first thing that came to my mind was, it depends. And I feel like you would be that kind of mentor that would invest the time in the it depends versus the prescriptive. And the prescriptive is where a lot of the fractional sit. Bookkeepers, it's prescriptive. Here's your thing. Here's what you do. They really are fractional because they're working for you part-time. But in the reality, it's, you must do it this way. You must do it that way. And here's my little model of how we do it. You must do it this way. Yeah. And I have this joke a little bit, where they say, I can grow your business on LinkedIn. And I'm like, how many times have we hear this? Do we hear this? Right. And it's and it is my joke. And I actually have people who respond to me in DMs all the time, and they're like thinking I'm serious. And I'm like, no, I'm totally joking. At the end of the day, I don't know if I can grow your business. I don't know if I'm, here's the reality. Just like human beings, businesses will have similarities, but they will have very unique differences depending on their economic timing in the, are we in a recession? Are we not in a recession? How many players do we have? People will say, well, we want a producer player. And I'm like, well, why do you want a producer player? I have more questions for you than I have answers right now for you. And I think you'd be that kind of mentor. And I think in your next role, which I know you're looking at next roles, because you'll get swiped up really, really fast. And I don't know, maybe you want to completely stay fractional, but at some point somebody is going to go, yeah, could you do this for me? And you'll probably get sucked up in there and you'll say, yeah, we'll probably do this for you, but I think that being able to play and to be experiential is probably one of your superpowers.
Oh, thank you. It is. I'm part of two different mentoring organizations, and I'm mentoring one. It's a medtech spin out from the University of Minnesota. He called and he had a dynamic that he was playing out, and I'm just giving an anecdote to support what you're saying, because I think when people go out and they seek coaches, you have to sometimes be careful to find somebody. It's like finding a therapist. Not all therapists are the same. You need to find someone that works for you and is going to spend that time. Anyways, so he reached out and, he had a very kind of a pressing thing. He has two mentors, myself and one other person. The other person said, well, this is why you're the CEO. You have to go in and do ... And he's like, so what do you think, Aric? I'm like, I think you should be you. And so I can give you what I would do, but it's not me that's going to sit in that seat. So, and then I started asking questions. And he came out with what he actually executed on, and he called me back later and said, "Thank you, best advice ever." I was like, "Actually, I didn't give you any advice. I didn't That was the thing. I didn't give you advice. My advice was, what do you think about this and then this, and just drew his own advice out of himself. And he, a lot of times, this is why it's hard and why I have a heart for founders and entrepreneurs, is because it's the loneliest job. You can't go to your board, you can't go to your investors and be transparent with them with what's stressing you and concerned about, or if you're unsure. And we all have moments. Like, there's even the most confident people in the world have moments of doubt. And you can't go to your senior leadership team, because you can have layers of transparency, and that's really good, but you can't be completely transparent. And you certainly can't go to like other employees in your company. A lot of times your spouse or your partner does not necessarily know what you're doing, and they know high levels, but they don't know what it's like to sit in the seat. So it's the whole mentoring thing is a really valuable thing. It is actually what I will do full time in retirement. We got one more take a company, scale it, exit, and then I'm retiring, and that's what I'm going to do when I retire.
Okay. Well, that's a great way to wind up this episode. So, Aric, where can they reach you? Just one place, and
LinkedIn.
LinkedIn.
Yep.
But LinkedIn. You have a unique spelling to your name.
Yep. Aric Bandy. Yep. Pretty easy to find, though.
All right. You have it, everybody. Aric Bandy, awesome. Great for being on the show. Please do me a favor. If you like it, love it, comment, share it. Aric is looking for his next thing. Reach out to him. That'll be awesome. After he's done finishing, combining the rest of the organization that you just sold off. But exciting times, and enjoy Italy. And thanks again for listening to this episode.
Thank you.